This is day 2 of the March on Washington by Charles Euchner. We are going to pick up where we left off yesterday at line 164, right here on page 60, where it says marvelous militancy.
Marvelous militancy. All summer, critics of the civil rights movement have wondered why blacks cannot be more patient. The president, congressmen, newspaper publishers, TV commentators, professors, mayors, unions, corporate CEOs, churches, social organizations. Everyone seemed to be saying to go slow. But the time for patience is over. Militancy, marvelous militancy, born of great patience and suffering, expressed with love, and applied with the tools of nonviolence, is now the movement's watchword. Cheers rise up, louder and more sustained than before. People smile.
They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied?
Not everyone could hear King's words. The sound system, the best available, still crackled and blanked out. Far from the Lincoln Memorial, people followed the words on transistor radios, and by watching the movement of bodies ahead. Down near the front, there were people jumping up, waving hands and flags and signs. Elsa Rael said, "We were a little out of it, so we had to make our own joy. So we were singing. We got small bursts of words from King and shut up."
We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating, "For whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote, and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
With each line, King increases the stakes for his movement. He begins with police brutality, the search for night lodging and food, and life in the ghetto. He moves on to children's dignity and the right to vote. He ends with the Prophet Amos's great image of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Each round gets cheers. First, scattered clapping and cheers and calls. Yes! Then more. That's right! Finally, huge applause. My Lord! Every good preacher, every good leader, connects with the real circumstances of his audience's lives. I know your pain. I have shared in your pain. I have been beaten and jailed and reviled. I have not forgotten how you have suffered. I know, so you can trust me. King has spent a decade learning about the problems of the people assembled before him. He has worked intimately with people at the highest and lowest levels of society.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive.
That brief phrase, unearned suffering is redemptive, strikes Harold Bragg like an electric shock. Harold and his wife Lynn traveled all night from Kent, Ohio in their VW Beetle. Harold sits on a stool, holding an umbrella over Lynn's head to block the sun. For the first part of King's speech, they listened to King like it was a lesson from a great master. Now the idea of suffering for redemption surges through Harold's body. He remembers his father telling him about his grandfather, one of the few black landowners in Alabama, sitting on a horse, getting shot by a white farmer who was jealous that a colored man could command such an expanse. His father, 5 years old when this happened back in 1917, saw his father fall dead off the horse. The lesson his father and mother passed on when he told their children that story was, you return hatred with love. King's whole speech has told of the hard, violent, brutal, unfair, unjust life of blacks in America. The wrong people have suffered. So many people have been tear-gassed, beaten, kicked, burned, bombed, shot. But that suffering, like Christ's suffering on the cross, can bring a better day. That suffering can change people's hearts. That suffering can clear poison from the system. Then change can come. Unearned suffering is redemptive. Believe it and you will fight on, with Martin. Disbelieve it and you will be gripped by despair, or the combative, uncompromising separatist jingoism of Malcolm. For now, the crowd stands with King. Even the separatists stand with King now. For that redemption to happen, to change the world, people need to return to their homes to fight and suffer still more for the cause of justice. So,
go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends.
Just feet from King, Mahalia Jackson calls out. Mahalia is an old family friend of the King's. She has been a guest in the King's house. She was with King in Detroit about a month ago when King talked about a dream. Tell them about the dream, Martin, she shouts. Please, tell them about the dream. King does not hear her, but he doesn't need to hear her. He already knows he's going to talk about the dream. He shouted out his dream last night in his hotel room after everyone else went to bed. Clarence Jones, sitting about 15 feet away, sees King grab the podium, lean back, and turn over his prepared text. These people don't know it, Jones says, but they are about to go to church.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice.
Richard Pritchard, a skinny white preacher from Wisconsin who returned to the United States from Africa just last night, sits by the reflecting pool. When his wife told him about the march, he jumped into a car at his family's home in New Jersey. All day he's been jet-lagged and weary from his early morning drive. But now, lightning shoots through his body as he hears about the dream. He remembers, feels his own dream, which called him to the ministry decades before. Pritchard became a minister because he believed God saved him as a small child when he spent 3 years in the hospital with tuberculosis. And then, as a young priest, he saw racism in God's own flock. White priests wouldn't take assignments in black churches. And so he decided to become the pastor of a black parish in Kansas City. Later, at a different church, members of his own parish made racist statements. Didn't they understand that God loved blacks as much as whites? My dream was to make Christ more realistic, he says. I used to talk about it, my dream. When I was a kid, I used to hear how the English talked about the Welsh as savages in the hills. And that's what they were saying about blacks. I could feel how blacks would feel. In Christ, there is no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female. We are all free in Christ. So skinny you can see his bones, the Reverend Pritchard dangles his feet in the water. He is being baptized anew. King's dream is his dream. The image almost removes him from the throng, and at the same time connects him even more with the throng. It's funny, it hit me with such force.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
That concludes the reading for today. If you need access to this textbook in order to answer the questions in Google Classroom in the Google Doc, you can find the text in Collection 2. Page 55 is where it starts. I will also share it so you can just click on the link where you find your calendar, the materials at the very start of the week, the calendar, and the video explanation for the week. The piece that we're dealing with will be there. So all you have to do is click on the link and it will bring you right into the textbook.